Hello and welcome to Today. My name is Jon. I'm your host for today's show. Today we're going to be talking about news media. On our panel we have
Ildiko,
who's reviewing radio. We have
Dwayne,
who's reviewing our online resources. And we have
Ashley,
who's going to be reviewing television. Now, we were asked 6 questions, and we decided to go out into the news media and see if what we found was congruent among all 4 avenues of media. So, what was the top news of the week? I reviewed the Toronto Star and the New York Times. 3 out of 4 days, the Toronto Star was talking about the election and the war in Afghanistan. And 3 out of 4 days, the New York Times was reviewing what's going on in Somalia and also the war in Afghanistan. So I was able to see a congruency there. Ildiko, you monitored radio, is that right?
yes, according to 680 News, they informed mostly about steps made by Liberal Party members, and they also talked about the war in Afghanistan and the fallen Canadian soldiers. The third category they covered the most was economic news. However, from the international field, MR1 covered political debates from Hungary. The main issues they are dealing with right now, budget issues and on all government level, and the racial conflict between Hungarians and Romas.
So we did see a bit of a congruency between the newspapers and the radio.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you had reviewed, what is it called, MR1?
MR1 is a main radio station in Hungary.
Okay, excellent. Dwayne, you reviewed online sources, is that correct?
that's correct.
What was the top news for the week on the online sources?
Police involvement around schools, arrests and murders, elections, Afghanistan, and missing teen girl.
So we did see a couple of congruencies again, so there's 3 things that we have. How about television? Ashley, what was covered?
Well, Jon, I can certainly say for the most part, City Pulse had a very in-depth coverage story on Miriam, the missing Toronto teen. Many opinions and words were said about the Liberal Party in favor of a new election, which was, as we all know, was overruled. In international news this week, Nordin Mohammed Top, most wanted man in Indonesia, a known terrorist, was killed near Solo in central Java. In other news, 4 young men falsely accused of raping an 18-year-old student at Hofstra University was released Friday.
Okay, so we did see some information that was congruent around all 4. Let's talk about that. We saw something having to do with the elections, or in now, as Ashley, as you mentioned, the cancellation of an impending election here in Canada. When I reviewed what I saw in the Toronto Star, they seemed to be focused more on the Liberal side of things. Did anyone else notice that?
I agree.
Certainly agree.
Yes.
Absolutely agree. And you reviewed, what were your sources, Ashley?
City Pulse,
Okay.
ABC, and CNN.
Okay, so CNN did not mention anything in regards to the Canadian election, correct?
Correct, I did not say that.
Anything going on in the States about elections? No? No. I think the biggest thing down there is the health debate, which I'm sure we will get into later on. How was the coverage of the election on radio, Ildiko?
In terms of the style, or
In terms of the style, was it, did they go into great detail? Did they do things very quickly?
Actually, the thing with 680 News, they are very crisp. The anchor speaks very clearly, everybody can understand, and the coverage is really fast. However, it's not true when I check the Hungarian news. They tend to speak way too much about every issue.
And go on a long description, correct?
Long conversations, yes.
Okay. So, let's do a quick recap here. We know what the top news of the week was, but what was the one single most important news, the biggest headline? Ashley, what did you find on television?
Well, the most important breaking news headline on CNN, for instance, was of course the death of Nordin Mohammed Top, shot dead in a raid, who is now known for terrorist attacks which killed dozens of civilians, many of whom were Australian.
Dwayne, what did you find was the most important news for online sources?
Well, it was the elections, which was broken up every day into different parties until the missing teen girl went missing, and then it's been her continuously throughout the week and weekend.
So it seems that your sources were more focused on local news.
Yes.
Okay. And Ildiko, what would you say is the most important news for the media that you've monitored?
Not only in my field, but I think we all can agree that the most important news everywhere is about politics.
It's always politics,
yes.
That's absolutely
yes.
correct.
Yes, yes.
When I was monitoring the newspapers, the Toronto Star was talking about the impending election, which of course they won't be anymore, and the New York Times was talking about the healthcare debates and bailout costs, both again related to politics. So, were they all covering the same topics? Yes. I think it's safe to say that we were all covering exactly the same topics. Now, we touched a little bit on the differences in the coverage between, for instance, a newspaper likes to go on and on and on about the description. You get your 5 W's and your H, your who, what, where, when, why, and how, right off the bat, and then they seem to elaborate ad nauseum about the details. In radio, Ildiko, you mentioned that things were much more short and a little faster. It's like they go through, what was the phrase that you told me off camera? It was sort of like who, what, where, when, why, how, next, right?
Yes, yes. It was always very fast, very clear, and just keep moving because it's like the information flows in a huge volume, so they seem to sort it out very effectively.
Okay. And the coverage online in regards to the election, now that we've focused on a major topic that we can all relate to, what was the coverage like online? Did you find it was lengthy, Dwayne? Did you find that it
depended on the party.
Okay.
And who had which days, like Bloc and Tory were on Tuesday, the NDP and Harper was on Wednesday, and then they summed it up very nicely on Friday, saying the Harper government will survive a confident vote.
The Harper government will survive a confident vote. Interesting.
Okay, well, Jon,
yeah.
My opinion to that question,
oh.
CBC went more into depth with their detail concerning the news on the election.
Okay.
Therefore, meaning more in depth with their interviews, their speakers, a little bit of their opinions, whereas City TV, also known to some as CP24, basically got to the point with their interviews, opinions, and bottom headlining captions.
There's always a scrolling news on the bottom, is there not?
Yes.
Of CP24?
Yes.
Okay. So it's always keeping you updated. It's almost along the same lines as radio, where it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're done.